If I said you'll master all colors with just this one exercise, you probably wouldn't believe me. But if I tell you, you will learn how to control one color perfectly with just this one assignment. That's suddenly a lot more doable now, isn't it? And if you can master one color, you can conquer them all. Let's get started. For those new here, I'm Mikko, I'm a concept artist and an art teacher. Over the last 6 years of running concept art courses, I've noticed there's one single exercise that improves the quality of my students' work and their control of color more than any other exercise. Through these classes, I've had a lot of time to narrow down the issues that most beginner artists have. And here we are gonna tackle color separation, saturation, and how to paint light. These are the fundamental pillars that you can use to paint anything in the future, not just do this one exercise. This is the color wheel, and the assignment is to take one sector of this color wheel. It can be a narrow sector like this, or a larger area like this. The colors that are within that sector that you have chosen, those are all the hues that you have to create your next piece of art in this assignment. Suppose you're in the very beginning of your art journey. In that case, I recommend picking a wider sector on that color wheel. That will make this a lot easier for you. But if you're a more experienced painter, or if you have a specific color that you are having difficulties with, in that case, you can just go more narrow and pick a smaller sector. And this way, this assignment is not just for beginners, but it is for all skill levels. I personally do this every year, few times a year, with the colors that I am having difficulties with, to level up my own painting skills. And if I'm completely honest, seeing the progress of my students when they are doing this assignment, every time it's so inspiring to me that when I see them kind of like get better so quickly, I always feel like I need to do that now as well. Throughout this video, I will be referring to this color wheel. This doesn't mean that you need to use this palette view to do this painting. It's just easier for me to separate the different hues and show that visually in this video. In fact, I recommend using the hue cube when you're painting, just because there's a bit more physical area for you to pick your colors from. You can expand the palette of the hue ring by pinch zooming into it, but still, I would recommend using the hue cube. And there are some difficulties with the hue cube as well, but I will address those problems later in this video and tell you how to go about having more control over the colors that you are picking. Sidebar: when you start your painting, choose your subject to fit the color sector that you have chosen. Don't choose blue colors and then decide to do a burning sunset, because you're just gonna make life really difficult for yourself for no additional benefit. So think about the color that would fit your subject, and that way this will be more easy and fun for you. And you will still get all of the benefits, I promise. Let's talk about one of the most important aspects when you're starting your painting: saturation. You can accidentally make the entire painting process way harder for yourself by starting the wrong way. A good rule to remember is that it's always easier to add saturation to any painting than to take saturation away from your existing piece. Working from muted colors to more saturated versions gives you more control over the entire composition. The eye is drawn towards this end of the spectrum. So if most of your colors are here after the block-in phase, this gives you plenty of flexibility to add saturation to elements essential to your piece's story. And that makes the entire process easier. Just as an example, look at these muted colors and pay attention to how your eye moves towards this line in the center where all the saturated colors are. This is basically how you want to move the eye in every piece of art, no matter what your style is. Your light source also modifies saturation, as does anything else surrounding your object. More practical tips on light next, but first, let's look at what this actually means when you are using this hue cube. Consider these edges as areas you should avoid in the beginning to make the painting process go smoothly in the final stages. You can always reach these ends later when you're pushing all of your colors in the end, but to do that, we will leave these exciting saturated colors for later. Trust me on this. It will be super fun and exciting when we get to the finishing part of this painting, when we can use all of those saturated colors that we have saved up for that phase. And if you have enough restraint, you will high-five yourself later when you notice that you have left all of this control and easiness in the later half of the painting where it really counts. And I've made you free tools to download so that you can make this block-in phase part as easy as possible for you, so you can get all of the benefits out of this assignment. One thing that connects beginner artists that are having difficulties with colors is a dull look when they have finished their painting. The most common reason for this boring look is that beginners render light and shadow by adding white and black to their local color. Light always has a hue. When we start to paint, we need to determine what the color of our light source is. Let's say my chosen color for this piece is this sector of the hue ring. I'm choosing my light source to be here in the bright greens. That means whenever I add light to a local color, on top of brightening the color, I'm also always, without exception, moving the hue towards the direction of my light source. On the hue ring, there are only two different directions that the hue can move towards, and you will move towards your light source through the shortest distance possible. You can find the shadow colors for your light source on the opposite end of the color wheel. Obviously, this is also outside the bounds of my selected hue range, but all I need to do is determine which direction on this wheel is the shortest distance towards my shadow hues. Then, when I'm making a shadow version of any color, I don't just darken them, I also move the hue towards that direction. But if my light source is right in the middle of my hue sector? In this case, the movement will be much smaller in the hue range as you make lighter versions of your colors. Note that the shortest direction to shadow colors changes depending on which side you are on. This is more difficult, and more importantly, it doesn't lead to better results. Always remember that painting in a clear way is kinder towards your audience. If the color theory in your painting starts feeling like rocket science to you, then it won't be any easier for your viewers either. So whenever in doubt, simplify. And this is not just for you to make the painting process easier, but to make the painting easier for your audience to read. A light source close to your local color can add saturation to your object, because the neighbor hues borrow and enhance each other's properties. If your light source is on the other side of the color wheel, the closest root moves straight through it, which makes the competing hues cancel each other out, and it results in these desaturated colors. When you're painting scenes that are set outdoors during the day, the saturation level of your light source is usually very low. If you're painting a plein air painting during the day outdoors and you're having difficulties telling what the hue of the light source is, then all you have to do is fold a piece of white paper to see the difference between the shadow and light hues. This hue contrast is what you want on every surface when you're rendering light and shadows in your piece. It will make all of your colors not only more vibrant, but it will make the entire painting more cohesive as a whole. A practical tool that can help with this is palettes. Honestly, this is something that I only started using about 6 years ago. Usually people leave me comments that they like the mood that is in my paintings, and I always feel like I'm cheating because all of that is based on the palettes that I start out with. Especially when I'm painting live, like this piece for example, and I'm still figuring out what this painting is even going to be about. But because I'm using a palette already in this phase, it's a massive help to start with colors that I know already that they have this internal logic built into them. So when I figure out what the painting is about, I don't need to rework the colors because that mood and that logic is already in there. We're going into more advanced techniques next, but before that, I have made free palettes for you to download and use for free to take advantage of all of this information and have all of this easiness in your own workflow, especially when doing this assignment. There's no catch, you can just download them for free in the link below. These are all based on limited hue ranges, and I named them with descriptions that give you a clear idea of how to use them. You can do this assignment with any process, but since I very rarely allow any sponsors on this channel, I hope you're okay with me mentioning that I have just released Best of Angry Mikko brush set on my store as well. This is a Procreate brush set that has been years in the making. All of this art has been made with the process here. You will also get a detailed explanation on each tool to take full advantage of all the features built into this process. Free videos like these are only possible because of the support of you guys. So I want to thank you for letting me make these free tutorials for everyone. Art education in some parts of the world is extremely expensive, and I want everyone to have access to this information so that they can enjoy and make art. And it's my belief that that will make this life a little bit better for all of us. But back to the palettes. You will notice that they are all built with that editing room I mentioned earlier. You might see a painting like this when it's finished and think, I want to paint something like that too. Screenshotting and color picking this piece for a palette is a terrible idea because the colors have been edited already. Therefore, by color picking an already edited picture, ends up with you making the same mistake mentioned earlier, which is starting with too much saturation. And I've literally given you the palettes here for free, so there's no reason not to do it the easy way. And now you're ready to move on to the more advanced technique, which is color separation. Remember the last time when you were stuck in the hue and saturation adjustment bar doing this? Changing the hue slightly to the right and then to the left. Maybe you should pick somewhere in between and post both versions on your social media. Sometimes we think that the colors are different because technically we did lighten or darken them. Still, if they don't fundamentally change how somebody else reads your image, then those small changes literally don't matter at all. Trust me, I've also done a lot of this in my life, a lot, so I'm not just guessing here. I see my students do it and I catch myself when I'm doing it myself. And then I just tell myself that this is not helping at all. There's a bigger problem that I need to address, and it's color separation. We can read value and hue differences when the jumps are big enough. Or more precisely, we can read them more easily when the jumps are big enough. These steps are visible, probably even through YouTube compression. But art should be something else than an optical guessing game for the viewer. To help our viewers, we will deliberately cut sections of hue and saturation ranges to differentiate between separate areas. Just by doing this, you can label elements even when they're all technically the same hue. You can use this type of color separation for values, saturation, and hue. The bigger your buffer zone is, the more contrast you build in that area. So the buffer zone is all of those colors that you omit from using in between those different zones. If you want an element to blend into the environment or fall back into the background, then simply scale this down or eliminate it completely. For example, this is what's happening in the sky gradients in both of these paintings. Color separation calls for attention. It describes your forms in a clear way, and whenever you're having difficulty making an element read, you can ask yourself, what transition colors could I exclude from this to make it read more clearly? This leads us into the most advanced concept of this exercise. The color that you paint with is only half of the color that we see. To prove this, let me ask you a few simple questions. Is this red a dark or light color? It is, and it isn't. Is it a warm or cool color? Yes, and again, no. Is it saturated? Again, we find that these questions can be answered only if we have context for it. So this red can be saturated and desaturated, just based on the surroundings. The way we see the color you are painting with is the result of the color you choose and the other brushstrokes that are surrounding it. When doing this exercise, you will have an insane urge to pick something outside the range of your chosen hue range. But there's a trick to mixing all of these impossible colors. First, we need to make a new layer for this, and then simply select the color that you want to paint with. Let's say I want to paint a yellow stripe here. On this new layer, I'm painting the yellow stripe. You can also use overlay for this as well, if you want that slightly more saturated pop of color. Now on the layer opacity, let's lower this down to the opacity until we are back in our hue sector. Is this color yellow? No, we know that it's not yellow, but if it looks yellow, then that's all that matters. And just like that, you have just used the most difficult part of color theory in your painting. By using this trick, you will soon realize that you can paint entire rainbows with just one tiny sector of the color wheel. And at this point, you have gained full powers of using this one hue in your paintings in a more rich, professional way, where you are no longer making childish, simple, oversaturated paintings, but you are using the full power of hue range, saturation, and values in each one of your paintings whenever you are using this color again. Now that you know how to learn color, remember that you will always have to combine this with the two composition rules outlined in this video.